He was born in the dark, in the middle of a cold March night, 5 weeks before anyone expected him. No welcoming committee, no celebration. Just a tiny wet shivering foal lying in the grass of a Texas hill country pasture. Too weak to stand, too small to be taken seriously. And according to the veterinarian who arrived at first light, too compromised to count on. The vet knelt in the dewy grass, ran her hands over him, checked his gums, his breathing, his temperature. She stood up slowly and looked at Ray and Donna Pute, who had been breeding Arabian horses for 22 years on their family ranch outside Fredericksburg, Texas. She said 2 words that would define the next decade of this horse's life. 2 words that trainers would repeat, that judges would confirm, that the entire equestrian establishment would echo one after another like a verdict nobody thought to appeal. "Prepare yourselves," she said. His name was Minute, and everything they prepared themselves for turned out to be wrong. Sahara's Echo was one of the finest broodmares on the Pute Ranch, a daughter of a national endurance champion with a bloodline that read like a Hall of Fame. She was scheduled to foal in late April. She had other plans. Nobody knows exactly why she delivered early. These things happen in breeding programs, even good ones, even careful ones. What matters is that on a Tuesday night in March 2014, she went into labor alone in a far pasture. And by the time Ray Pute's flashlight found them at 4:30 in the morning, the foe had been on the cold ground for at least 2 hours. He was alive. Barely. His body temperature had dropped dangerously. He couldn't coordinate his legs. His suck reflex, the instinct that drives a newborn to find the mare and nurse, was weak and inconsistent. These were not good signs. In premature FAWs, each one of those problems is serious on its own. Together they paint a picture that experienced horse people recognize immediately. Donna Pute recognized it. She recognized it, and she ignored it. She moved a cot into the barn that night and didn't move it out for 9 days. She learned to tube feed a foe in the first 48 hours because there was no other option. Rye drove 4 hours round trip to San Antonio for a specialized milk replacer the local co-op didn't stock. The vet came every day for a week, each visit slightly less grim than the last. On day 4, Minute stood for the first time. Wobbly, ridiculous legs spread like a folding table, being assembled by someone who'd never seen a table before, but standing. On day 7, he nursed from Sahara's Echo on his own. On day 9, Donna moved the cot back inside. She sat on the porch that evening and cried in the way people cry when they'd been holding something in for a very long time. Minute had survived the first crisis. The longer, quieter one was just beginning. The consequences of his early birth didn't disappear with the newborn crisis. They just changed shape. As Minute grew through his yearling year and into his 2-year-old development, what the premature birth had done to him became clear. His bone structure had developed with unusual density. His body compensating for the compressed developmental timeline by building heavier, thicker architecture than his breed standard called for. His stride, as a result, never developed the floating, elevated quality that Arabian show horses and flat racers are bred and selected for. He moved with a choppy ground-hugging trot that made experienced horsemen sessy. Not because it was bad, because it was wrong for everything they were looking at him for. Too plain for halter classes. Stride too rough for breed showing. Insufficient elevation for competitive trail at the breed show level. A biomechanics specialist who examined him during his 2-year-old was polite about it, but thorough. She used words like permanently altered musculoskeletal structure and compensatory development. She concluded that Minute would be comfortable as a pleasure horse, a good companion, easy to ride, enjoyable for trails. She did not recommend investing in him competitively. Ray Pute had driven 4 hours for milk replacer to keep this horse alive. Now he quietly shelved any competitive ambitions he'd nursed for him. Minute was given a good life in the pasture. Plenty of space, good feed. The company of other horses. He was healthy and calm and completely unremarkable. He was, as far as anyone at the Pute Ranch could tell, A very nice horse that would never be anything more than that. That was the understanding. That was the consensus. That was wrong. Carol Brady was 58 years old and had been riding endurance competitively for 30 years. She had completed 2,300-mile rides. She had won regionally, placed nationally, and trained horses that other people had given up on more times than she could count. She was not a woman who missed things. She came to the Pewitt Ranch on a Thursday afternoon in the spring of Minut's third year. She wasn't there for Minut. She was evaluating one of his half-siblings, a well-grown, beautifully striding 3-year-old that Ray had mentioned to a mutual friend. Exactly the kind of horse Carol was looking for. Long, efficient stride, good bone, solid temperament. She was watching the half-sibling move in the round pen, clipboard in hand, making notes. The evaluation was going well. The horse was everything he looked like on paper. And then, Minut trotted past the fence on his way to the water trough. Carol stopped writing. She watched him for maybe 15 seconds. He wasn't performing. He wasn't being asked to do anything. He was just moving from one point to another. That choppy, efficient, ground-covering trot that everyone at the Pewitt Ranch had spent 3 years apologizing for. But Carol Brady wasn't looking at him through the lens of a halter judge or a show trainer. She was looking at him through 30 years of endurance racing. And what she saw stopped her cold. That stride wasn't wasting a single ounce of energy on elevation. Every footfall was converting effort directly into forward motion. His top line was relaxed. His breathing was unhurried. He was covering ground the way a distance runner covers ground. Not beautifully, but efficiently. Ruthlessly efficiently. She turned to Rye. "What's the story on that one?" Rye told her the whole history. The premature birth, the 9 days in the barn, the developmental irregularities, the biomechanics report, the shelved ambitions. Carol listened the way a person listens when they're doing math in their head. "Can I see him move properly?" "Sure," Rye said, "but I'll save you the time. The vet's report is pretty definitive." Carol looked at him steadily. "Vets are definitive about the wrong things sometimes. Can I see him move?" Ray brought Minut to the round pen. Carol watched him trot for 5 minutes. Then she asked for a caner. Then she asked Rye to bring out a heart rate monitor. She carried one in her truck, because of course she did. And she checked Minut's recovery rate after 10 minutes of sustained movement. She looked at the numbers, looked at them again, looked at Minut, who was standing quietly, already completely calm. That familiar drowsy expression settled over him like he'd just woken up from a pleasant nap. "Rye," she said carefully, "how long has this horse been sitting in a pasture?" "About a year, and nobody has talked to you about endurance." Rye stared at her. "That horse, he can barely trot pretty." Carol looked back at Minut. When she spoke, her voice had the quiet certainty of someone who has been in a sport long enough to know what they're looking at. Endurance horses don't need to trot pretty. They need to trot forever. And this horse, I think he might be able to do exactly that. The Pewitts agreed to a 6-week trial. Carol took Minut to her conditioning facility outside Kerrville. 6 weeks became 12. 12 became 6 months. What she discovered in that time systematically dismantled the biomechanics report, not by proving it wrong on its own terms, but by revealing that it had been asking the wrong questions entirely. Yes, his stride was choppy by show standards, but his stride efficiency ratio, the energy cost per mile covered, was extraordinary. She'd measured it in horses for 30 years. She'd never seen numbers quite like his. His gut motility under sustained exertion was robust. This matters enormously in endurance racing, because horses can die from digestive shutdown during long efforts. It's one of the most common reasons horses are pulled from 100-mile races. Minut's digestive system, tested under increasing training loads, simply kept working. His hooves dense and tough from that compensatory bone development everyone had treated as a flaw. Handled rocky hill country terrain that was tearing up horses with textbook perfect conformation, and his recovery metrics pulse and respiration returning to baseline after hard effort. In endurance, Horses are checked by veterinarians at every hold point during a race. A horse that doesn't recover to acceptable parameters is pulled from competition immediately, regardless of where they stand in the field. Carol had spent her career trying to improve recovery numbers in horses. Minutes were, to use her word, absurd in the best possible way. She called Rye on a Sunday evening, 6 months into the trial. "I want to tell you something about your horse," she said, "and I need you to hear it properly." "Okay?" He didn't develop wrong. His premature birth forced his body to be maximally efficient with every resource it had. He built himself for survival. And it turns out that what you build for survival, if you point it in the right direction, is the exact foundation of an endurance horse. He was always going to be built for a longer race. We just didn't know it yet. There was a long silence on the line. "So, what do we do now?" Ray asked. "We enter him in a qualifier," Carol said, "and we find out how right I am." The Texas Hill Country 50 Mi qualifier sat on the racing calendar in early October. 50 Mi of limestone, cedar, and elevation change that had humbled horses with far more conventional credentials than Minute possessed. He walked off the trailer at the ride meeting, looking like someone had brought their backyard pony to a professional sporting event. The other horses were tall, powerful, specifically bred for exactly this moment. 16 hand Arabians with bloodlines that read like a who's who of endurance racing royalty. Minute stood among them at 143, calm and apparently unimpressed. A competitor who had been racing for 20 years looked at him, looked at Carol, looked back at him. "Is that an Arabian?" she asked. "He is," Carol said. "Is he going the whole 50? "That's the plan," the woman nodded slowly. The way people nod when they're being polite about their skepticism. Cole's strategy for the first 25 miles was simple. Find his rhythm and don't interfere with it. Let him settle. Don't ask for more than he offers. Conserve Minute ran mid-pack. Not flashy, not inspiring. The kind of performance that if you were watching without context, you might describe as fine, acceptable, unremarkable. At the 25-mile veterinary hold, his recovery numbers came in second fastest in the entire field. The vet checking him looked at his card, looked at the horse, looked at Carol. "What is this horse?" "A mistake that worked out," Carol said. The final 15 miles were where the qualifier revealed itself. This was where the limestone got serious, where the elevation pushed horses to their limits, where breeding and preparation and heart got sorted out from each other. Horses around Minute began to tire. Their riders asked for more and got less. The gap between effort and output widened in a way that endurance veterans recognize and fear. Minute didn't accelerate. He didn't surge dramatically. He simply maintained. His trot didn't change. His head stayed level. While horses that had towered over him at the start line grunted and labored up the grade, Minette kept moving with that economical, unhurried, utterly relentless rhythm, eating up ground that was defeating animals twice his size. He finished 4th overall, and he won the Best Condition Award. In endurance racing, the Best Condition Award is given to the horse judged most physically fit relative to the work performed. It's an assessment of how the horse looks coming out the other side. Pulse, respiration, gut sounds, muscle tone, attitude, hydration. It measures not just speed, but the cost of that speed on the animal. Serious endurance competitors will tell you quietly that best condition is harder to win than the race itself. Donna Pute had driven out to the finish line alone, not telling Ray where she was going. She stood at the rail as Minute came in. When they announced the best condition result, she put her face in her hands. She was thinking about a cot in a barn. About 4-hour drives for milk replacer. About 9 days of not knowing if any of it would matter. It had mattered. The Big Country 100 is not a race that forgives. 100 m of Texas Hill Country terrain, starting before dawn and finishing. For the horses that finish at all well into the following day, the completion rate in most years sits below 60%. The horses that don't finish aren't failures. They're simply horses that encountered the honest limit of what their bodies could sustain. Carol entered Minute the following spring. The endurance community is small and interconnected, and word had traveled. People had heard about the premature foe, about the biomechanics report, about the best condition award on a horse that had no business competing. Some were curious, some were dismissive in the specific way experts are dismissive of things that threaten their framework. One prominent competitor asked at a regional meeting what she thought about Minute's entry said this: Arabians are bred for endurance over centuries. Bloodlines matter. Conformation matters. A horse compromised doesn't unbecome compromised because someone tells a nice story about him. It was a fair thing to say. It was also wrong. But nobody knew that yet. The start line of the Big Country 100 at 4:30 in the morning is one of the stranger sights in equestrian sport. 73 horses and riders moving in the darkness. Headlamps catching the breath mist of horses and humans alike. The hill country silent, except for hooves and the creak of tack. Carol and Minute left the line without ceremony. There was nothing to announce yet. By mile 40, 18 horses had been pulled. Heat stress, lameness, metabolic complications. The attrition rate was running ahead of the historical average. By mile 60, Minute was in the top 10, moving through the field steadily as horses that had started ahead of him slowed or stopped. His vet checks remained exceptional. At each hold point, the veterinarians examining him exchanged the same look. The look of professionals encountering data that doesn't match their expectations. At mile 75, the vet who had checked him at the qualifier found herself checking him again. She pulled Carol aside at the hold. "I've been doing this for 20 years, she said quietly. "I've never seen numbers like this at mile 75 of 100. Carol nodded. She already knew. She'd been watching his ears, still forward, still curious, still engaged. At mile 75 of a 100 miles, her horse was paying attention to the world around him. The final 25 miles of an endurance 100 are where everything true about a horse comes forward. It's where breeding and training stop being the story, and something harder to name takes over. Carol would say afterward that she stopped riding Minute somewhere around mile 80. She simply went along with what he decided to do. He crossed the finish line of the Big Country 102nd place overall best condition award again. In a field of purpose-bred experienced open 100-mile horses, animals whose entire existence had been shaped toward this single discipline. A horse born 5 weeks too early, written off by a veterinary biomechanics specialist, left in a pasture for a year, had just completed one of the most demanding athletic tests in equestrian sport, and outperformed animals worth 20 times his purchase price. Carol Brady stood beside Minute as the awards were announced, one hand on his neck, feeling his pulse, already dropping back toward resting, already recovering, because that's what he did. She was 59 years old. She had spent 30 years in this sport, and she had never cried at a finish line. She cried at this one. Not because he'd won, because she understood what she was standing next to. A horse whose body had been built by crisis, shaped by survival, refined by years of quiet and waiting, and then pointed at the one discipline in the world where all of it was exactly right. The biomechanics specialist who had written the original report on Minute heard about the Big Country 100 results through a colleague. She reached out to Carol 2 weeks later, not defensively, not to justify her original conclusions. She reached out because she was genuinely, professionally curious about what she had missed. The conversation they had about how endurance demands a completely different physical vocabulary than the metrics she'd been trained to evaluate became a continuing education paper distributed in veterinary circles the following year. She put her name on it. She didn't have to. Her willingness to be wrong publicly and to learn from it publicly was its own quiet act of professional courage. The half-sibling that Carol had originally come to the Pewitt Ranch to evaluate the beautiful well-striding prospect that had been the whole reason for her visit never made it as an endurance horse. Metabolic issues surfaced in his second competitive season. He was retired to light trail work. The horse Carol had almost walked past on her way to the round pen became the center of her competitive program for the next 7 years. Ray Pewitt does not describe himself as a sentimental man. He will tell you this directly if you give him the chance. He is a rancher. He is practical. He made a decision to keep fighting for a compromised foe because his wife was already sleeping in the barn, and he wasn't going to be the one to tell her to stop. He will tell you all of this. And then if you ask him what men means to him, something changes in his face that he doesn't seem entirely aware of. I spent 3 years apologizing for that horse. He said once in an interview he agreed to only because Donna made him. Apologizing to vets, to trainers, to anyone who came out here and looked at him and told me what I already knew, that he wasn't what we'd hoped for. 3 years of sorry about this one. He stopped, looked out toward the pasture. Turns out, the one who needed to apologize was me. Carol Brady, who had quietly been considering retirement before a chance visit to a Fredericksburg ranch, changed her mind, won her first national-level endurance title at 61. With Minute, she has since taken on 3 other horses that didn't fit conventional molds. Horses that other trainers had passed over, dismissed, declared unsuitable. She is becoming known in a sport not given to sentimentality as the trainer you call when you have a horse that doesn't make sense. She says she learned one lesson from Minute that changed the way she evaluates every horse she looks at now. I spent 30 years looking for horses built for endurance. I was looking for the right conformation, the right stride, the right bloodline, the right numbers on paper. Minute taught me I was looking for the wrong thing. I should have been looking for a horse that already knew how to survive. Because a horse that already knows how to survive, you point that horse at the longest, hardest race you can find, and you get out of the way. Minute is 12 years old now. He lives at the Pewitt Ranch, retired to pasture after a competitive career that included 1,100-mile completions, 6 Best Condition Awards, and a regional record in the Hill Country 100 that still stands. His recovery metrics, according to the vets who have followed him for years, have barely changed from his early career. It's as if his body has a ceiling it never quite reaches. Carol visits every few weeks. She brings carrots, which he accepts, with the same unhurried patience he brings to everything. She'll stand at the fence sometimes and just watch him graze. That choppy, economical trot, carrying him from one patch of good grass to the next. The trot that everyone spent years apologizing for. She doesn't apologize for it anymore. There is a version of Minute's story that is about endurance racing, about Arabian horses, about the science of premature equine development, and the biomechanics of stride efficiency. That version is true, but it's not the whole story. The whole story is about what happens when the thing that was supposed to disqualify you turns out to be the thing that makes you. About the difference between being built wrong and being built for something nobody has thought to look for yet. About the people who sleep on CEs in cold barns for 9 days because a small, shivering, compromised life is trying to hold on. And that seems like enough of a reason to fight. Donna Pewitt was asked recently what she would say to someone who told her in the spring of 2014 that keeping that premature foe alive wasn't worth the effort. She thought about it for a moment. "I'd say you were measuring the wrong thing." She said you were measuring what he looked like right then. I was measuring what he was trying to do. He was trying to live. Turns out, that was enough. In the end, it turned out he was never missing anything at all. He was simply waiting for the right chance to prove it. If Minute's journey touched your heart, make sure you subscribe to Stories for Horseback. Because every single week, we share powerful stories about horses who were underestimated, people who refused to accept no as the final answer, and partnerships that changed what everyone believed was possible. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever known a horse or even a person who was counted out before they discovered their true path? And don't forget to tell us which country you're watching from. We love seeing how far our Stories for Horseback family reaches around the world. If you know someone who needs to hear that being different doesn't mean being wrong, share this story with them today. Until next time, we'll see you in the next story.